We have a whole generation of kids that are saying no to social media. They're leaving their phones at home. They're buying physical media again. They're buying albums and they don't have turntables, right? That's this new generation that we have coming into the shops for the first time. And I think we get an opportunity to get in front of them in a way that nobody ever has.
My guest today is the founder of Prana Direct Market Solutions, which is a consulting business helping publishers, retailers, and creators navigate the changing landscape of the comic book industry. He's also a sales manager with Bad Idea Comics. He's previously been sales manager and director of sales over at Valiant Entertainment. He worked at Comics Hub, which is a pre-order comics portal for retailers, publishers, and fans. He started his journey in retail, won the 2008 Eisner Spirit of Retail Award, and he currently also hosts the Comic Industry Insider podcast, which I was just on, and I'm going to encourage you to go check out immediately after you listen to this podcast to sort of hear part one of this conversation. But welcome officially now to Comics Launch, Adam Freeman. How you doing, Adam?
I am so good. You know what I loved about that intro is how many pieces I just want to tweak just a little bit. Like I keep wanting to make. Well, I was actually a VP. Oh well, you know what? It's all true. I did all of those things. Thank you so much. I've been a longtime fan and looking forward to being on the show. This has been great. And as you mentioned, we just did the other way where I got to do you, and so now I get to relax and just answer questions, which is awesome.
I guess where I want to start, and then hopefully we'll fill in the gaps in your backstory and things like that. But I want to begin with this latest venture, Prana Direct Market Solutions. Mm-hmm. For those that don't speak fluent comic book, what is the direct market?
Oh,
and
boy. Yeah.
What is the direct market here in I would say traditionally, and then what is the direct market here in 2025 as you see it?
Well, so the direct market is very much industry speak. And I'll be honest, Prana Direct Market Solutions is the strangest name that anybody ever gave to a company that does anything close to what we do. I mean, we're a consulting and services company that focuses on the publishing and sales and marketing of comics and understanding all the ways that those things happen, right? I'm a big fan of yoga. Yoga's been a big part of my life for a long time. So when I was looking for a name that I wouldn't mind working 18 hours a day for, Prana worked because it's a Sanskrit word that means essentially life force, right? And it just, I don't know, it felt enough supernatural, and I have a whole different thing about how data is the life force of comics and blah, blah, blah. But the direct market part of that company name refers to this network of stores that you and I know as comic shops or local comic shops, and comes out of, there was a period when comics were sold exclusively on newsstands. And those newsstands were places that people would go every single day, in some cases, just to pick up a new newspaper or magazine or whatever. And the comics went there and they were sold returnably at a lower discount. There's a man named Phil Suling, basically as old as I am. It happened in 1972. He went to the publishers and said, hey, I want to buy direct from you. I want to give you a bigger percentage of the cover price, and I will not return anything because the newsstand copies were all returnable. And he then began the first distribution network to comic shops. And that has been the model ever since. Of the comic shops buy at, depending on who they're buying from, 40 to 50% off, the non-returnable, which means that they have a better idea of what it is that they're going to sell. And that comes with its whole host of issues that, people like me have tried to tinker with over the years. But yes, it is this network of stores. I keep being asked this question, so I'll say about 2,500 or so, 25 to 2,800, depending on how you define them in the U.S., another 2,000 or so worldwide, again, depending on how you define them. And it's an incredibly remarkable statistic because it has not shifted plus or minus 4% in 2 decades.
The number of stores?
The number of stores. The store count itself has not shifted that much. We had a big dip at the beginning of COVID, but that was as low as we have ever been. And it has remained incredibly consistent throughout. various economic crises throughout, the rise and fall of how we read and what we read, and the, digital landscape changing. These comic shops have been there. They've been in their communities. They've been this vital component of community, period, with a capital C, for many, many people for decades.
So here we are in 2025. One of the exercises I like to encourage creators to do as they venture with putting together a Kickstarter project is another thing borrowed from business schools and marketing classes, the standard SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, threats, opportunities. How would you break down the direct market here in 2025, just in those quadrants? A few things that come to mind: strengths, what are the weaknesses, are there threats right now, and then most importantly, I think for what you do and what creators listening here is, where are the opportunities? Feel free to.
Fascinating question. Wow, Tyler, right out of the gate. I love it.
And I guess one of the strengths, I guess, would be that you just said, hey, like the stability of this infrastructure of shops, and they haven't fallen off the map like Sears stores
or your local bookstore or your local video store, or your local record store, or whatever. Any of those places that we just thought of as just retail stores, even your local pet store, right? You go through a strip mall now that used to be mostly brick and mortar, and if it's not a comic book shop, it's some sort of service, right? It's a nail salon or a karate studio. So
H&R Block.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So this is a fascinating question. So I'm gonna be doing this on the fly. All right. Primarily, number one, I would say this when we're speaking directly from an independent creator standpoint. Am I correct? Okay. All right. So from the viewpoint of an independent creator, the direct market, the strength is, I would say the number one strength is it is a place to build a brand, right? If you are building an entertainment brand, if you're a storyteller that you're trying to build a larger brand out, and you have aspirations toward Hollywood or licensing or, amusement parks, I don't know. Really, without some sort of representation in the comic shops, it becomes that much harder to convince the those gatekeepers that you will have the value that the people who are in the comic shops do have. Right. So that is, the primary goal with comic shops right now is just brand building. It's just almost a marketing expense. And if you're looking at it as a marketing expense, it's incredibly valuable. You know how difficult it is to build a brand on even, say, YouTube, a free platform. It's still incredibly expensive. It's still that much cheaper to build a brand inside of comic shops than it is on YouTube. So it becomes this platform for that. Weaknesses. It's almost impossible to make money there. If you are an independent comics creator, your chances of making money in a comic shop are probably, or in the direct market, are probably lower than your average casino. Well, let's just say, all right, if you're sitting at a backgammon or at a blackjack table, right, and you can count cards, it's probably about the same, right? Your odds of winning. The house is always going to win. And that's really just simply because of the amount of copies that the market will take in of any given title, right? You have to, by nature of the fact that you're not going to be selling 30, 50,000, 100,000 units, you are going to be working with a very small number of stores who value the kind of work that small creators do. That's going to limit the amount of volume that you can push in, which is going to limit the amount of systems that you have access to. And all of that means that your chances of you actually making money there are really, really slim. But it's a beautiful place right now because it's not the only place to make money, which is what it was in, say, 1985 if you were a comics creator, right?
Right, yeah.
What was should I go to opportunities next, or what was the threats? Was it threats?
So what I usually do, I usually do threats third, just simply because to do opportunities and then to come up with all the threats, you'll sort of talk yourself out of it.
That's right. You end on a down note.
Like instead of doing the worst case scenario. So that was the problem I always had with like the SWOT. That's just my little pro tip for filling those, because it's like you'll be on a high and then oh god.
I do this in our podcast, and I did the risk with you. I didn't do the hope, but I do a version of this on our podcast where I say, what is the biggest risk facing the industry right now? And then I say, what gives you hope for the future? Because you do. Because the first time I asked the threat thing, I got this really great answer. I knew it was going to make great clips, but I was like, God, this is fucking downer. We need to, we got to end on a high note. Anyway, so threats. What are the biggest threats for creators going into the direct market? Right now, the biggest threat is how difficult it is as an independent creator, but also even as a creator owned, to get the same sort of sales that we're seeing in the stores. The stores, I'll get to that in a minute. But so right this second, it is the people that are dominating the sales, even more than normal, are the big two, right? Marvel and DC are right now taking a much larger share of those sales than they usually do. And there's a good reason for that. The Dogman generation is finally getting their first jobs, and they have money to spend, and they're going into comic shops, and they want their first Batman book, right? It's as simple, right? Yep. They're not yet ready to think about, okay, well, Scott Snyder wrote Batman. What else does Scott Snyder write? They're not ready for that just yet. So that's really right this second where that biggest threat is because you're going to go in and spend a lot of money trying to get in front of these people. Like, say you go to Comics Pro, or you work with a service like ours, or like in massive indies, and you spend some money to get into the catalogs, or you band together with a bunch of friends and you figure out how to get into the catalog yourself, or to set up your own distribution. Like, all of those things are really a challenge right this second, is getting in. Yeah. And it's not a cheap or easy aspect. Now, the opportunity is that Dogman generation is showing up. The stores are up 18% year over year. And we have seen, we saw a huge spike during COVID, a very slight dip right after, and then nothing but growth ever since. And we're still seeing that. 27% of that growth, 27% year over year growth in single issue comics. Wow. So people who are showing up in stores it's happening. I mean, that you just don't see that in a mature market, 27%. I'm talking to stores that are 40 years old, or seeing, or 30. It was a 38-year-old store who saw a 40% increase year over year. You just don't see that in a mature market.
So one thing, I guess, because some of these new barriers are coming in, are there less comics on the shelf now than there were pre-COVID?
No. Like
in terms of individual units?
Yeah, I mean, they're the individual SKUs, right? I mean, covers are hard to work out of that. Yeah. You got to wait for covers. We're not
counting the crazy variant game.
Yeah. I mean, Marvel is still, even though DC is really nipping at their heels right this second, Marvel is still the market leader. Why? Because they sell more SKUs than anybody else. If you normalize for SKUs, DC beat them a little while ago, right? So SKUs really make up a big difference. I would say that there's probably about the same, honestly. Like, Lunar is putting out a pretty dense catalog. PRH, for all that they do with just the big guys, they put out a pretty decent sized catalog. It has become easier. The barrier for entry has gotten lower. So as a result, there are more people in, but it feels like it's harder to break in because there's a limit, of atoms versus electrons. We can put an infinite number of songs on Spotify, but there's only so many copies of a physical book that Lunar can push through a catalog, through a warehouse, right? So it feels that way right this second, so that there are some barriers, and you don't have a Diamond Comics just basically saying, if you leap over this very low barrier, you can get into our catalog. You don't have anybody like that right this second. And so as a result, it feels like it's tougher, but that's only because the opportunities are just different now.
And this is something that we're still rising, because, just to give you a little background on our, the Comics Tribe journey, because I sort of come at this from publisher. When I started, getting in the comic shops was still like the holy grail, right?
Yeah.
But largely out of reach beyond crappy consignment deals, right? You know,
Yeah.
so I was, the first comic I printed, that was a color comic I printed. I was happy that my local comic shop down Harvard Square took 5 copies or whatever and put it in the corner, and 2 of my classmates went in and bought it. So
Sure.
kind of like Kickstarter in that day, where your
Yeah.
early stuff is going to be supported by people who know and like and trust you. But eventually, as we sort of went on, like we kind of got into that scrappy micro distribution movement where we made some connections with local retailers who actually was like, hey, this is pretty good. We know some retailers. Let's do a limited run. And they were already sort of in the early days of, hey, we can sell these to our customers for cover price, but we can flip these on eBay and drive up some speculation stuff, thanks to things like The Walking Dead and other just like indie surprise hits. So we did that, and then from there we were able to get into Diamond and put together a nice, like that was one of the things that why I always recommended like the micro distribution thing as a stepping stone to getting into Diamond, because one of the things that Diamond was like, hey, is there a retailer market for this kind of book or this title?
Right.
And one of the best ways to do that is say, hey, we've already had these retailers say, hey, we sold these books and we vouch for it.
Yeah.
So that helped us there. But then we had the problem of like, oh, we're a small press publisher. We're not sitting on a war chest of funding or VC capital like some publishers. How do we, float print runs and then several months before it comes back? And the answer for that for Comics Tribe was Kickstarter. We could use Kickstarter. We could make more. We could get more funding than we actually needed just to do the thing that we were making. And for the first time, we had money sitting in a bank that we could then apply to other projects and get out there. And so that was key. And so there was a while there, 2012 to 2015, 2016, where we were like Kickstarter for certain projects, but the direct market is where things would really take off and get a momentum of their own. And unfortunately, that didn't really happen. In fact, and some of our series did all right, but it was like, wow, if we compare the amount of time and effort and hours that we put into the Kickstarter versus the direct market, the return that you get back it's like almost all Kickstarter. And now in some cases, we're like giving back some profits that we made on Kickstarter to be in the direct market. And then
I think it really, to me, that whole question goes to something that I've been in had some privileged places that I've worked. And so as a result, I've had a very specific viewpoint on in some cases about building brand over profit.
Yeah.
Right. And where is, there was an entire generation before us, the generations of marketers and advertisers whose primary focus, their goal was brand.
Yeah.
How do I build a brand? And you don't build Coca-Cola today without having done that work over centuries. You really kind of have to decide, am I building a brand, or do I need a return on advertising spend for everything I do? And am I able to do that and think, is there some long-term thinking, or does it all need to be short-term thinking? Neither. That's not a bad question to answer either way. It's just a matter of who you are.
Absolutely. From the brand perspective, we have a couple of Comics Tribe properties that have now had media deals or potentially in development. And those are all ones that did have some market penetration in the direct market.
Yeah.
And would that have happened had we not gone there? And then also, with a series like Sync, we have a really high average pledge level that we get because we have creators that first discovered the book in comic shops as a collector's item. And I do think that there still is some sort of like, oh, this is a real comic because, it has, the retailer support in the past and is sort of seen as that. So yeah, like I'm with you that trying to find and thinking about the brand as opposed to just the immediate ROI is something that, is worth considering and as a part of it. And, one of the things that I often have said on this show is either or thinking usually isn't the best answer. It's
No.
yes and this and that, and how do you put these different pieces and planks in place such that you've got a stable product and IP that's got a shot to do some cool stuff.
I think where we stand right now, you have to be a mile wide and an inch deep, right? You have to, at no point, not at no point, it's incredibly difficult right now to be an entrepreneur and put all your eggs in one basket and to watch that basket like a hawk, right? It's instead, you really kind of have to have lots of eggs and lots of different baskets. You and I are both good indicators of this. You not only have Comics Tribe, which you only have Tribe. Yes. Sorry, we got the two mixed up for a second. You have Tribe, which is a slate of books, some of which you write, some of which you just publish, right? Yep. And each one of those comes with its own challenges, and each one of them has several different lines of distribution. You also have Launch with its podcast and its lessons and its, your communities. All of those things take some of your attention every day, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The same here, right? I have Prana. I have a handful of clients that we work with, and we do our very best to make sure that we're giving them very best value that we can. But I also have the podcast. I also have a live show that we do every Tuesday. I have a newsletter that goes out every week. We've got our own communities that we participate in. We're always building on these things, because at the end of the day, there is no path where I get to do what I do without that. And I've made a career now, 30 years or on, of selling comics, basically, right? And that doesn't happen I guess it would if I had just stayed in a comic shop. But even then, you'd have to diversify your thinking. So it's the same for comics creators. You have to flip every switch. You have to be building your audience. Scott Snyder is still, to this day, doing things like his newsletter. I can't remember what that newsletter platform is called right now, but
Substack. Yep.
Yeah, Substack, right? He's still doing his Substack. He still does lessons, and he still does all of these events, and he's still showing up for signings. Like, no matter at what point you are, there is no, I just want to do the work. Well, this is the work,
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the, if you learn that lesson earlier rather than later, it's probably for the best.
Yeah.
So I think we are now almost 6 years coming up post the COVID shutdown and the diamond breakdown and the monopoly broken, pencils down, and Kickstarter came out of that, pretty strong.
Yeah.
To the point where I think there's 390 live projects on Kickstarter last month in the comics category, which is probably more than, and that's a high point for the year, no doubt. But it got that high, and I don't think there's 390 indie comics in solicited to comic shops now. So Kickstarter kind of
maybe, but I get you.
It kind of is at least for indies. But I am wondering, because that perception is sort of rising, Kickstarter is sort of hitting high watermarks every year. Is now do you think the rec market could be a blue ocean again? Sure. There's a brighter future there. It may be sort of undervalued by a lot of Kickstarter creators. And then, if so, what are some steps creators should do to try to? Because there used to be one gatekeeper, pretty much.
Yeah.
Which was Diamond, or you do the micro distribution. You roll up your sleeves. You contact 200 retailers and try to get 20 of them on board.
Yep.
With something special, some kind of special perks. But what do you think the best course of action is for a creator or a publisher that's all right, Kickstarter's working for me, but I'm ready to give this direct market thing a shot?
I'll get into that list first, but before I do, I want to say that, we also do some crowdfunding for our clients. We also do some book market distribution. We do some direct consumer distribution for our clients. So we do a lot of different platforms. And what I will say from what we've seen and from what we've experienced is that really all of this comes down to two factors. It's the quality of the product you're putting out, and it's the size and quality of the audience you've built. And that's really it. Like if you have those two things, you're going to find distribution. You're going to find the value that you're looking for in new markets. You're going to find all those things, but you really have to be so hyper focused on those two, call them metrics, call them KPIs, whatever they are. But it's just that quality of the product and the audience. Now, that said, should you if you've built a sizable audience and you're putting out books that are of sellable quality, not even saying, you don't have to be Jim Lee, right? Yeah. Just saying you have a unique product and it is of it passes that barrier of quality. There are some options. Option number one is really Lunar distribution. I think they are the most broadest platform for stores that handle indie comics of any kind. They, though, have had to start saying no. They say no a lot more than they say yes these days.
Yeah, the last I had checked, they were had hit a pause button on their onboarding of new publishers, and I don't know if they've resumed or if it's a sort of still as a case-by-case basis, or are they, and then I do know that there are some sort of sub-publishers or whatever we call them.
I call them publishing aggregators as someone who owns one. And we'll get into that, right? So if you want to get into Lunar and you don't cross the barrier that they have in front of you, you can still get into that catalog through what I call not sub-distributors. They're often called sub-distributors, but I like to think of them as publisher aggregators. Right. We aggregate these publishers and we break them over. Why is this important to Lunar? Well, they have two barriers for distribution. It's how many books they can put into a warehouse and then take out of the warehouse. And it's how much time do each individual publisher do they need to talk to a rep, to deal with accounting, all of those things. Those are very hard limits for them. By using an aggregator, let's say Massive Indies is probably the largest of them right now. What you're doing is they still have to find room for you in the warehouse, which is an ever-growing resource for them because they can find more real estate. Yeah. What they don't have is the ability to train an infinite number of people to deal with comic book publishers because we're a pain in the ass. We just are really difficult to work with. So you have to
we don't get our stuff in on time. We always have the changes. Yeah.
We're horrible, right? So they have to be specially trained. So what people like Michael Calero at Massive Indies, what my team with Prana Publishers, what we offer, the service we offer is that we are a single point of contact for them. So we are one person who is gathering together all the catalog pages and all of the metadata. And we're one person that we're going to work with their bookkeeper and is going to take their deposits. And it's one central flow. Yeah. And that is the value that we bring. Now, granted, that comes with a charge. I have to charge for that, right? And I distinguish our service from Massive Indies because I focus so much more on marketing you. If you come into our system, we use our resources to make sure that you're getting in front of retailers as opposed to just giving you a listing. Now, we'll say that we're not the only ones. I think we might be the only ones that are advertising this service, meaning Prana Publishers and Massive Indies. But every publisher, this is an old tactic.
Right. I mean, it's to a certain extent, Image has always been an aggregator in that, like, they don't own any, and there's a fee associated with it.
Exactly. And IDW and Dark Horse and all of these publishers have done these deals over the years with different people, sometimes as favors, sometimes as just services. Like, it's always it has been a big aspect of our system for a very long time. It's just now it's becoming into light. So that's number two, right? One is Lunar through an aggregator. You could theoretically get into PRH. Really, that's just a crapshoot at this point. A larger portion of that is Universal distribution is coming into the U.S. market in 2026. They're already in Canada. I think it's very likely in order to get into there, they're going to have the same problems that Lunar does. In fact, their main U.S. warehouse is going to be in the same town as Lunar's warehouse. So they have the same limitations. So we're probably going to need some sort of publishing aggregator to get there. third one is going to be somebody who has already set up like an independent publishing arm. There are two really main ones. Only one of them whose name I'm going to say right now because I feel like the other one hasn't really reached the barrier of professionalism that I would think you would use to call them a distributor. But Power Pulp is a crew of publishers that got together. They have an office, they have a warehouse where they have terms that are good for retailers. They can handle all the billing. They can handle all the shipping. You could get into the Power Pulp. You probably get their attention a lot easier than you could get Lunar's attention at this point, right?
Yeah.
Now, where does that leave you? What is that? What is it? 1, 2, 3, 4. This is number 5. What is number 5? I think number 5 really, Power Pulp gives you an image of what number 5 could be. Like you could right now, Andy Schmidt and Gamal Hennessy had this crew called Comic Relief, and they had a Discord. And I want to say it was in October of last year. I said, look, we're about to enter a real rocky path. And so now is the time to build coalitions. Now is the time to group together and find your way in. And anytime you have a grouping of publishers, I think you have an opportunity for those coalitions. Yeah. So you could, I'm not saying you, Comics Tribe, but maybe Comics Tribe, right? Maybe you go to Lunar and say, we're going to be your single point of contact. You work with us, we will work with these people. Or a crew out of Comics Tribe could get together and say, we're post-it distribution, we want to work with you, Lunar. And if Lunar says no, that's fine. You've already done that work. The logistical work is really the hard part. Now you have to figure out how to put shit in boxes and how to send out invoices to retailers and then begin the process of marketing yourself to the retailers. So what I'm saying is that there's still opportunities. They just look a little different now than they did last year.
I can remember the first book we put through Diamond. And, it was Joe Mulvey, great artist. I can remember when we listed his first book, Scam. And there's always like that time between when you submit the thing for solicitation and then you beat the drum about it and then you get those orders. It could be anything. You're comparing it to all of the things that you could see back then, you could see on the Comic-Con list, and maybe it'll be this, maybe it'll be that. And inevitably, the numbers will come back and they're disappointing. Although compared to the last Diamond order that we got, it's like, oh man, we would have killed for those the Scam #1 orders.
Yeah.
I'm curious how, especially for indie books, where are the order numbers coming in from Lunar now? Are they significantly lower than what publishers were getting with Diamond? And at what point is it even worth it for you or Prana to list a book with Lunar? Or in the old days, like Diamond sort of said, well, 1,500 or less are usually, potential for, cancellation or whatever. They didn't know. They rarely stuck to that, but sure, that they gave you a benchmark there. But I'm curious, just what, in terms of numbers, or what are we even looking at right now with the Lunar catalog that's still kind of building?
It's really difficult for me to have that conversation just because of proprietary agreements and whatnot. But right. I will say that we've been open about, I'm trying to remember what numbers we reported. We reported some numbers for The Future Is, which is a title that we did for Recca Publishing. They're a division of a cybersecurity firm, and we're doing this book written by Fred Van Lente and Neo Buffi and Mario Alessandro. And it's about this kind of cyberpunk future book about hackers. And it's, written by hackers in many ways. But anyway, all this to say, we launched this book from an unknown publisher. And I think we publicized those numbers. I'm trying to remember what we've said, because I don't want to get myself in trouble by saying things we haven't said out loud. But what I can say is, the direct market is no longer the only source for people who are buying comics, right? So even if you have a hit looks very different than it did 20 years ago, 15 years ago. Even, I don't know when that first book, when you put that out, but what was it, 2015? So right around there? Was everyone get that right?
2012.
2012, okay. Yeah. So right about the same time we were launching Valiant, right? Yeah. Numbers look very different now than they do then. I have all the sales numbers of Valiant from back then, and I can tell you that while we're seeing about the same number of stores ordering, their numbers are lower, right? It's the same everywhere in entertainment,
Yeah.
right?
So
A
much choice.
hit TV show needs a tenth of what it needed to be a hit when you and I were kids, so it doesn't, that is just kind of the nature of that beast. I will say that Lunar, I believe that they have some limits, and I want to say it's in the 300 to 500 unit range. Like if you're not hitting 300 to 500 units, you're probably not ready for them, and it's probably time to step off the merry-go-round. I don't believe we have any current clients that are lower. No, we don't have anybody currently who's lower than that. And most of them are in the thousands. I think, except for like some trade paperback, exclusive trade paperbacks. But I would say that if you're in that 2,000 to 5,000 unit range, you're probably in the same boat as most of the people who are in the kind of struggling in the direct market right now. Yeah. And it is a struggle. I mean, I'm hearing numbers out of Image books that I don't want to report on, but they're lower than you would expect from those kinds of titles, from those kinds of creators.
Is Image now exclusively with Lunar, or where are they?
They're currently, for the US, they are currently exclusive with Lunar. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, but those numbers are low. We talked about this on my podcast. We're in this incredible period of growth for the comic shops, but most of that, nearly all that growth is going to Marvel and DC.
Yeah, so a lot of absolute Batmans.
A whole lot of absolute Batmans. 9 printings on that thing.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
9 of that number 1. Yeah, so, but that gives me hope for 2026, like so much. Because you and I went through this process. You get to know comics, you get to love them, and you get to know who the creators are. And then you start searching down, oh, well, I love Dark Knight Returns. What else has Frank Miller done? And next thing you know, you're part of that Sin City wave. And then. I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see a lot of people that grew up with Dogman, have first jobs, ready to start spending some money. They start exploring what they love, and they're going to go deeper and deeper and deeper. And that's just the way culture goes, right? Is that we're going to all start, diverging into lots of different ways. And so I think that's where the comic shops are going this year. I think that answers your question.
Yeah. And so, So Prana, from what I understand and what you're saying, you have now a relationship established with Lunar and
with Universal.
Yeah. And one of the publishers that you announced that is coming under your umbrella is SourcePoint Press. My pal Dirk Manning.
Oh yeah.
You guys had a great recent interview and just talked about that. But I guess who is Prana looking to partner with, and what does sort of that relationship look like? You mentioned a little bit of how you guys can differentiate yourself, but for the publishers out there that are like, oh well, maybe it is time for us to get into Lunar. Maybe this is a path. Who are you looking for?
Honestly, I will talk to almost anybody who is making comics right now or trying to create a business in comics, because that's my own personal obsession, is what does the business of this business look like? So I will talk to almost anybody about that. And then sometimes the process is, if there's a publisher that wants to work with us on distribution or crowdfunding or whatever it is, they bring us the idea. We talk, we see if we vibe, if energetically we're there, we'll take a look at your work. We look at your work as a team. I've got a team of about 8 different pros that I work with on a daily basis. And we all take a look at the books and we discuss them, and we get a feeling for whether or not we can contribute. And that's a really big piece for us. It's like, if this would be successful without us, go pitch it to Image. It's already there. Go take it, right? Yeah. Or let me introduce you to somebody at IDW. Because I'm not looking to take value out of your business. I'm looking to create business value for you. And so if we think that we can, we will give you a proposal, and it adjusts a little bit per client. So a lot of these numbers are not like real public, but there's a monthly fee and a percentage that we take. And if that works out, if the contract gets all agreed to and signed, then we get you into the catalog. And then at that point, we really go to work. We have a team that is always looking to book you on all the different podcasts, place you on try and place interviews with some of the websites, get stories placed, all of that, the PR work that happens. And then we as a team have built these platforms for publishers, so for retailers and publishers, but a lot of the traffic that we get is from retailers. So we do the regular podcast, we do our weekly live show that is, I would say, just based on the chat, is primarily comics retailers watching us from their stores as they set up. Yeah. We do a newsletter that is nearly all comics industry people. And we use those platforms to push your work as well, right? You mentioned seeing the interview with Dirk and Josh. So the goal is to create these platforms that multiple people can use, but always our clients are using to promote their work. And so, and then we just go through that process of working directly with retailers. We talk to retailers every day. Every single day of my career has talked to a comic book retailer, and even when I was a comic book retailer. So we just are constantly talking up our projects and clients, and then we're trying to build your brand, build you out so that the next project is more successful than the last. So
yeah. I mean, it's definitely it's one of the things that and I've been sort of sharing and has been an important part of the journey, is just realizing that like all of the skills that it takes to make a really great comic they're vast and many, and there's completely different skills involved in selling that great comic. Yeah. And it's okay if you don't have all of those skills, but someone on the property, on the team as a whole, needs to be checking those boxes. Otherwise, you can't expect to get the results that, people that are out there that are able to hit all of those.
Crazy industry, and that it takes so much specialized knowledge to do it right. That it could, I mean, if you have what it takes to get all that specialized knowledge and do it well, you could probably do a lot better in another industry. But we're here, like, this is the thing that we love, and so we are part of that industry, and we're part of building that ecosystem that the next person has to learn how to navigate. So, yeah, it is a weird way to make a living, but the truth is that I personally work mostly with people who have never really attempted to be comics creators. Like, we fell in love with the process. We fell in love with the business side of it.
Switching gears, Comics the Magazine.
Yes.
So you're associated with that.
Thank you.
What is this?
So Comics the Magazine this is number 0. We put this out for Baltimore and New York Comic Con this year. Comics the Magazine, it comes out of our love of those magazines that we grew up around, right? Wizard Magazine, Comics Buyer's Guide, even the real trade organization magazines like Comics Retailer and that kind of stuff. Like, we just love that period, and we started thinking about what are the things that are missing from our industry. And one of them is, how do you get in front of people who buy comics? Now, obviously, your Kickstarter crew, you've all built your own little infrastructure and your own little ecosystem of people who love comics. But primarily, the people who buy comics go to comic shops. We still, in the numbers, still way more people are going to comic shops and buying comics than there are anywhere else. And that includes digital. So how do you get in front of them? Well, it turns out it's really hard. Like, there is no single website. There is no content creator. There is nothing, because when you survey those people who are buying comics and you say, all right, what made you think about buying these today? Why did you make the decision to buy this stack of books? They almost all, 9 out of 10 times, and I've done this work, 9 out of 10 times what they say is, I don't know. I just come in here and I look at what's on the shelf and I talk to my favorite clerk behind the counter, and sometimes they tell me what to buy, but and there is no recommendation engine. There's nothing where you get in front of them. Maybe you could put some POP materials at the cash wrap if the retailer wanted them, but like, even that's really hard and expensive. So we said, well, how do we do it? And so we realized that's what magazines were. They were a way to market to the consumer. So aside from the editorial, aside from the articles and the cartoons and all of the things that go into a magazine, it's an advertising engine, right? And that advertising engine is what takes people like our friends at Boom, allows you to get in front of people who like comics.
Yeah.
And so we're selling this thing. It's going to be out in March. It came out of our experience working with Chip Zdarsky and his ZCN magazine, and we've essentially just built on top of that and have an amazing crew together. I've got Joe Keating doing editorial, Rico Renzi doing colors and design. I've got Gabe Yoakum, who was the sales guy for C2E2 and New York Comic Con. He's our head of sales. So we have this amazing team. I don't know. I'm really proud of what we've done so far, and I'm real nervous we're going to get it wrong, but we work really hard at it. So, yeah.
And is that something that's being distributed through
Lunar and Universal? Yeah.
Universal, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it'll be priced $2.99 at cover price, and so stores will be able to get it at 50% off, or they'll be able to buy it in bundles and get it for 50 cents each. So they could give it away in their subscription boxes, which is what we're hopeful for, is that everybody who gets a pull box at certain stores is going to get one of these every month.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, understanding the infrastructure that is the direct market and, making things easy for them to market the stuff that's out there seems like a smart. It's not all about like the latest and greatest hot tech notification thing. Sometimes
Nope.
like the physical book in hand still is the thing that makes a difference. All right, I want to ask briefly about Bad Idea Comics.
Sure.
Launched in 2020. From my understanding, several former Valiant Comics folks, including you,
Yep.
made some intriguing headlines, some bold marketing, and self-reported full of bad ideas. Made a whole list of every comic in limited quantities, comics never reprint, comics sold in stores. There are Reddit threads about all the crazy stuff that you guys have done over the past couple of years.
By the way, those guys, there have been times I read one guy wrote this long Reddit thread and just taking down everything that we said, and I loved it because it was one of the things I don't think he quite understood was how much about engagement it was.
Yeah.
Right. It was about getting people riled up and excited, and we did that for him. It is. Yeah. I'm still proud of it.
It gets a little meta there. And for me, there's a part of me that totally understands that marketing is first and foremost about attention, but also if you are a marketer, you're in an experimentation mode. You're a scientist. Yes. You have some hypothesis, but you test them against the market, get results, tinker and so that's one side. Then there's the rational Tyler that's like, oh well, there's a reason we do some things and don't do some things. So I just ask you to reflect a little bit on 5 years out from the start.
Sure.
What were some of the bad ideas that were actually really freaking smart and more creators and publishers embrace? And then what was a bad idea that, it was generally just that awful idea?
Listen, there are certain things. Those guys are still doing good work, and I don't want to talk too much bad about them because, they're still doing good work. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm really proud of the work we did at Bad Idea. One of the things I think most people miss when they look at what we were doing there was just how much work we put into the quality of the product that we were putting out. Those books I am still incredibly proud of. So I would say that the number one lesson coming out of that is that if you make good books, you have an opportunity to do a whole lot. You get to put on your P.T. Barnum hat and go for it. That's the whole thing. If you've done that part, then all the rest of it is just about, hey, look over here for now. Give me your attention for a moment. So that's number one. I would say that near and dear to your heart, we stepped into Kickstarter as a way of promoting the books that were going into stores, because coming out of COVID, we needed an opportunity to say, hey, we're going back into stores. I think this is our second wave that we were going back into stores. We were looking for every opportunity to do that. So we created this thing called Stop Bad Idea, which was if we raise a certain amount of money, we'll go away forever because we know how much we annoy you. And it was a gag at first, but what we realized was, oh, we're actually really good in this environment. Like, we understand this environment because once again, it's about the quality of the books, and it's about how do you get people's attention, and are you entertaining them when you do it? And sometimes entertaining them means making them angry.
Yeah.
You know, because some people just like being angry. Otherwise, they wouldn't spend so much time on the internet being angry.
Yeah, there's always a, WWE angle to it where, like, you got to have a really good heel,
Sure.
but you don't take your eyes off him when he's on the stage.
Exactly.
Even if you're throwing stuff at the TV.
And we're in an environment where, no matter what your political leanings are, you cannot escape the fact that we have had now our second term of an engagement president. Yeah. Like, his goal is to engage the audience.
He's an influencer president, basically.
Absolutely. That's exactly it, right? His goal is just to get people excited, whether they're excited for him or they're excited against him, they're excited. And I will tell you, talk about a heel. One of my favorite heel turns of all time is what's happening right now with Marjorie Taylor Greene. And she's doing this heel turn on the conservatives. It's incredible. But once again, it's a school that this kayfabe that we learned to kind of understand through WWE, through professional wrestling. Like, that is real. It's just how we operate as a society, as a culture. It's engagement is everything. So yeah, that was number 2, Kickstarter. I would say number 3 was there is no way to run a viable publisher in this day and age just going through the direct market. You really have to create some sort of direct to consumer program. And that direct-to-consumer program is additive to the direct market. If you have an engaged direct-to-consumer program, you're going to have an engagement with that audience, and then you can say to that audience, go to the stores, right? I will say number 4, this one's going to get me in trouble. Number 4 is sometimes you have to piss off retailers to get them to pay attention. Sometimes you have to do something that makes them a little bit angry, that you're making their lives a little bit harder, because otherwise they won't. You're just another nice guy in the crowd. And if you're making,
I'm thinking of like those strict rules for the one, putting a limit on the number of retailers who could even carry your books, and then having strict rules about things that they had to follow in order to carry the books. And it's sort of but it is taking the girl that's got all the attention and not answering her text.
Exactly. Yeah. No, there's a little bit of that
on red.
There's a little bit of that, but there's also a little bit of just really good basic business practices. The 80-20 rule, if you don't, the audience should know, the 80-20 rule just is basically that 80% of your results are going to come from 20% of your efforts. And there's been plenty of scientific understanding of this, plenty of market analysis that says this is true. It's always going to be the case. 20% of your portfolio is going to give you 80% of your results. This was the same. We noticed this at Valiant, which was that we would spend tens of thousands of dollars getting promotional materials into stores and giving it to everybody. And the same list of 20% of the stores were the only ones who were using it. Everybody else was just either giving it away or throwing it away or whatever. It was just trash to them. So we were spending tens of thousands of dollars on trash. So what we decided was, a bad idea is that 20%, we're just going to figure out who they are and not even bother with the 80%. They're not even on the list. Now, does that create some FOMO? Does that create some desire to some, what is the opposite of abundance is
scarcity.
Scarcity, right? Does it create
people
some
want
scarcity?
What they can't have, right?
Exactly. Sure. That was like an extra result, but it was never the intention. The intention was, how do we isolate out the people that we really want to work with? Yeah. And so it worked. It worked incredibly well. You're the first person, by the way. I've done a lot of podcasting, a lot of interviews in the last year. You're the first person to ask me these questions about bad ideas. So I'm giving you some scoops here. I can tell you that because I watched the sales numbers and I knew what our sales numbers were, even with that small number of stores, we were a top 5 publisher every time we went into the market. And that's because those stores leaned in. They leaned all the way in because we were leaning into them.
Yeah.
Because we gave them crazy resources. We gave them golden buttons, and we gave them all of this shtick that went with it.
Yeah, I mean, the reasons that Kickstarter can work is because you can do things that you can't normally do through a distributor like Diamond.
Exactly.
You're very limited. I guess one of the things that I'm interested in now that there's this new game that is Lunar and Universal.
Sure.
For me, for Comics Tribe, one of the things that we figured out early and we just kept doing was that, like, we never really were in the position where we could play a serious, like, variant cover game with, like, retailer exclusives and minimums and all of that.
Yeah.
But one thing we did do was just we did A/B covers and please show both in previews, and we're going to 50-50 split allocation, and that meant that we had multiple two covers to sell. Some of our collectors would get them both. It bumped the numbers, and it gave us a little bit more extra free space in the previews catalog for every issue. I'm curious, like, are there any things that creators are starting to do, or that even publishers that you're working with can do to, like, squeeze a little bit more juice out of a listing in Lunar, or whether it's variants, whether it's retailer incentives, whether it's opportunities to, I mean, with Diamond, it was also like, all right, well, here's the listing that you get, or you could pay us an ungodly amount of money and you could be on page 302 with a half-page ad, and always trying to figure out, like, is there any chance that comes anywhere close to making, sense? But
covers, as you mentioned, I don't know if it was in this one or the last one, covers still work. I don't know when that train is going to end. I refuse to call it a bubble anymore because it's a trend that goes up and down, and has been since I started in publishing in 2010, right? That was really when this current started. So they still work. Occasionally I like tinkering with discounts. Right this second, returnability was a big buzzword for the longest time. Right this second, however, bundles are much more valued. So if you can give a discounted bundle, that
what do you mean a bundle?
DC really kind of got this ball rolling where they will say you can buy. Well, in the same way, we're doing it for Comics, the magazine, right? So if you buy one copy as a retailer, you're going to get it at 50% off of $2.99. So you're paying $1.50. Yep. If you buy 25 copies, you get it for 50 cents. 50 cents, yeah. Right? And that's what a bundle is going to do for you. It's a way of giving a bigger discount while also, but it comes with extra costs and you get less revenue, but you get more copies out there, right? The costs are you have to have the printer bundle them for you, and that's an extra cost. It's just is what it is. It's the name of the game. So there are some of those things that are working. And I will say that everything works within the bounds of what your strategy is. Like that's a really lame way to put it. Every book is different. Every strategy is different. Every creator, every publisher has a different set of circumstances and a different set of goals that they're trying to achieve. And I think part of what we've done and part of what I've done is really try and understand all the different things that people have tried and what succeeded and what failed, and then apply them when you need them. So there are all these little different tweaks of, over shipping unannounced if somebody qualifies for this, or announcing you're going to overship if you qualify for that, or, whatever. I don't think there's so many different variations. I think that right this second, though, the key that I would give most publishers entering this market is don't do what we did at Bad Idea right now. Because right now, you'll notice Bad Idea, there's still many people there who were there when we were there, when I was there, and they're not doing the crazy shtick, right? They're not saying, here's the gold button, you have to give it to the first person who buys it. No, you can't give it to your favorite. No, I'm going to take it away. They're not doing that stuff. Why? Because retailers right now are so overtaxed, like their attention is so overtaxed. They are well into the red. Like they went from having one distributor that they knew how the things worked, and they were still finding ways to complain, but they had one distributor.
On the same day every week. Yeah.
Every week. It was like clockwork. And they had one person to complain to, and they had a 20-year relationship with that person, and they don't have any of that anymore. That whole rug was pulled out from underneath them. And so now they have to deal with a minimum of two. and sometimes 3 or 4 distribution channels just to do the bare minimum of the work that they do. They have to have POS systems that they have to learn, because those POS systems are the only way they can navigate all of these different retailers, or all these different distributors and all the different publishers. They still have to keep track with everybody's new covers and all of this, and they have to deal with like exclusive covers that some people have and some people don't, and they have to be able to make those decisions on the fly. All of that means right this second, 2025, the comics retailer is your value to him is what audience are you going to bring to me? If you can go to a comics retailer and say, I've got 100,000 people on this mailing list, here's a book that you can sell, look at it, hold it, you have a sale, right? It is as simple as that. It's what audience are you going to bring to me? And I would say anytime your value prop to any new retailer right now is about what audience do you have access to that they've never seen before.
But like with so many relationships,
Yeah.
you get out what you put in, and finding ways to add value first, bring value first, and create. And thankfully, there's a lot of different opportunities to do just that.